feel like there's a little bit of perspective that kind of gets lost once you enter the market and become a landlord of multiple properties, because you become so far removed from the reality.
If people don't become removed from the reality, what happens is their lived reality is different to yours.
There are many people who have university degrees, who have, what's considered professional careers and high-paying jobs, who still cannot afford homes because of the market.
I want to pull her up on that one. People say, oh, people with good jobs, they can't afford homes. What they can't afford is the homes that they like. What they can't afford is to live in the areas that they want. What they can't afford is properties that they find desirable. That's the reality, right? If you're trying to get into the market, the only question should be, what can I afford? As a young'un trying to get into the market, you're there and you just say, you don't have a super long list of criteria. You just say, what can I afford? And you look at all of the options that you can afford and you pick the best from what you can afford. And what I see too often is people aren't wanting to do that. People will say, I can't afford to buy a property because they can't afford to buy an ideal property in an ideal location. And that is true. Even older people can't afford to do that.
The careers that you would get that would get you a 3-bedroom home in a suburb close to amenities, to public transport, to schools, hospitals, and all of those things, those homes you would be able to access with those incomes 20 years ago when you entered the market are impossible for anybody to access these days.
There you go, that's it. So she just listed her criteria, right? She can't afford that. She can't afford that criteria. She's given you a long list of items that need to be ticked off. 3-bedroom home. You don't buy no 3-bedroom house, bro. Buy what you can afford, right? You don't go into the property market as a young person trying to buy their first home and saying, here's all of the things boxes that I must tick when I buy a property. No, there's one box. What can I afford? You tick that box and you find the properties that you can afford. And that is called being realistic. You need to be realistic and you need to buy what you can afford. You need to shop within your budget. Like that's not just for property, that's for everything.
And that is just the reality that we are living in. And I feel like that perspective gets lost, that young people, we are real people who are living through this life and going through all of this, dealing with it all, only to be told that we need to work harder. It's like, how hard do we have to work?
Harder, work harder, give more of yourself. Do more than you're paid to do, and then one day you'll earn more than you're paid to do. That's just how it works. But we can empathize with the cost of living and how expensive things are. That's the reality, right? But there is no substitute for buying things that you can afford, and that includes property.
I don't have a spare minute of my time that I'm not working to try and just get through, and we're supposed to work harder. It's like, where? What, tell me, honestly, how much harder do I have to work?
Well, how hard do you work? Like, what does that look like, right? I remember when I was young, I was like 18, 19 years old, just out of school, and I was working, there was a period where I was working 2 jobs, right? 2 jobs. The longest shift that I ever did, I left home and I started on Monday morning at 7 a.m. at one job. I worked from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then I would go to my next job from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. right? I left home on Monday, started at 7 a.m. Monday morning, and I finished, both jobs finished, 7 p.m. Friday night. So are you working that hard or are you working kinda hard?